Thanks for checking out this movie review video. So this is for the 2021 film Hellbender. It's a Shudder original and it's coming to Shudder on Thursday, February 24th. So this is a no spoiler review since it's coming out before the film hits Shudder and just because it's a newer film. First things first, apologies. My energy might be a lot lower and I may get more red looking as the time goes on. I'm fighting something, not feeling well. So, but the reviews continue. So that's just my quick disclaimer. Now, that said, Hellbender is an interesting film. There are a lot of interesting things about this film. A few things I didn't really love so much about it, but overall, I enjoy it. I would recommend people checking this one out. Written and directed by John Adams, Zelda Adams, and Toby Poser. Seems like they work together a lot. They've also done films The Deeper You Dig, The Shoot, Knuckle Jack, that's an interesting one, Rumble Strips, and Halfway to Zen. And to reiterate, coming to Shudder on Thursday, February 24th. Now, quick synopsis. I mean, I don't want to give too much away, but it's basically about a girl who's kind of isolated from the world. She lives in a wooded area with her mother, and her mother keeps her away from society as well as an ailment, basically, that she has. And I feel like that's enough to kind of give you a groundwork for what's going on here without telling you too much, because I don't want to tell you too much. There are some synopses out there, I think even ones that Shudder are throwing out there, that kind of tell you very specifically what's at play here, which I just don't want to do that if people want to go in totally blind. So anyway, the opening sequence, I was very wowed by the opening sequence, especially for this being a low-budget independent film. And that's one of the big things about this film is it looks really good. There are a lot of really interesting shots. There's interesting lighting done, interesting use of shadows. There's good practical effects as well as good CGI, which I harp on CGI not needing to be used a lot of times, but if it's done sparingly and it's kind of mixed with practical effects, it can look good. And also if you're not leaving it on screen for a long time, which these individuals knew what they were doing, and they use CGI properly, they use practical effects properly, and like I said, looks great. Directing, cinematography, very, very excellent. And like I said, for a low-budget independent film, it looks really good. So there's a lot of very interesting shots, and it's very, very visually appealing. And I am all about visually appealing films, as long as they still have substance, which this one definitely has substance. So I'm down with that. The opening sequence not only looks wonderful, but it is dark. Not, lighting-wise, but, well, a little bit lighting-wise. In general, the film has a very kind of drab color palette, which, just kind of goes with the overall atmosphere and feel of it, so that's totally fine. But it is dark in the sense of material, and it is interesting. It is a really good attention grabber, and I love the way that this film starts, in my opinion. Now, the only thing I will say is because it starts so strongly, it does become a little bit tougher to kind of be as excited as the film progresses, because it starts like up here and then it goes down to here because you have to, establish who the characters are. And I do think it kind of has some pacing issues. They're not terrible, but there are definitely pacing issues in this film. It's an hour and 22 minutes, I believe, with credits and everything. And it feels like it needs to have some stuff kind of cut down a bunch. Well, not a bunch. A little bit is what I mean. I was going to say cut down a little bit. It doesn't need a bunch cut. It needs a few, snips here and there to kind of tighten it up. I think maybe they were a little bit concerned about doing that because then it would take it too far away from that hour and a half mark. But in my opinion, as you know, if you watch enough of my reviews, I am all about just hitting whatever time mark you need to tell your story effectively. So they could have... Well, they do tell this story effectively, but they could tell it more effectively if they cut some of the stuff out. Because there are just some scenes that they tend to go too long, and some other scenes that just feel like they're retreads of stuff you already saw, and you already fully understand about the story going on and about the characters themselves. So, that's just one of my, little issues with it. Great music. I love the music in this. And there's something interesting that they do. I'll just tell you this much. This doesn't give anything away. The mother and daughter have their own band. And it shows moments where they're playing their music, and that music is really cool. And I like the way they kind of integrated the band and the music being played by the band into the film itself. Not only that, but just like the rest of the soundtrack, quite good. So, real big fan of the music and the way it's integrated in this film. Little bit of a mixed bag with the acting in this film, but you expect that with low budget independent films. I will say that one of the actors who gets a decent amount of screen time, at first I was like, but then as the film goes on, they get stronger and stronger. So by the end of the film, I was feeling pretty good about where the acting performances were. It's just in the beginning, it seems shaky. Now, that said, you just need to realize that, you're not getting the most amazing caliber acting in low budget independent films. So just know that going into it. And like the very small parts, characters that are just kind of showing up and maybe not really having lines or having barely any lines, that acting is not good. Typically. There are a few that do a decent enough job, but there are ones where you're just like, ooh, not so great there. But, probably just people they knew, just throwing them in there. They're not there to be the backbone of the film, so it is fine. There is a shot in this I want to point out. For anyone who's seen the film The Blood on Satan's Claw, the folk horror film, which at this point when I'm doing this review, I think is still on Shudder to watch. It is quite good, and it's considered to be one of the unholy trinity of folk horror films. So there's a specific shot in that film which is very well known if you know the film. It's very kind of an iconic look. It is used in this film. They basically took like that exact same shot and put it in this. So very interesting. Check that out. Already talked about that. Real nice shooting locations, which they really kind of take their time with. I think sometimes a little bit too much so, but at the same time, I do think that they were kind of trying to enhance the folk horror aspect of it. And obviously with folk horror films, it's very much tied to nature and characters kind of being in nature and drawing strength from nature and stuff like that. So I understand why they were kind of immersing the film in nature. I just think that there were times where it felt like they were kind of trying to just sightsee it maybe a little bit too much. And that goes back to what I was saying about the pacing, just needing to be tightened up a little bit here and there, but nothing, super major. There are some cool, really cool, actually, disjointed kind of like flashback sequences. You'll see what I mean when I say disjointed. They're very intentionally disjointed for a specific reason, and they look great. And once again, for being like a low budget independent film, I was very wowed by the visuals they were able to get, especially with these flashback sequences. I was like, wow, okay, you go. Good job. There's an interesting take on the specific things that is at the core of the film. That's the thing that I won't say in the synopsis, but some people you may already know about if you've seen synopses from like Shudder or other people promoting the film out on social media. But their take on that specific thing that is the core horror element to the film is interesting. It's their own kind of twist. It's something that's been used a lot in films, so you always want to see someone who's using it nowadays have their own spin on it, basically. And I think they did their own spin on it, so I was happy with that. And there's a pretty good payoff at the end of the film. Like I said, there were those pacing issues, but by the end of the film, it made me think, I don't really care about them that much, because the ending really kind of brought things together in a good way. It was pretty intense. And you get the point. You get the point. The film definitely feels like it was born from the pandemic, because there is kind of like, there are a bunch of themes in this, actually. And that's one of the things that I like about it, is it's a thematically complicated story. So there's a lot you can see in it. But one of those things is you really do feel like this was a pandemic specific script, because there's a lot of isolation dealt with it. And, you could probably see where that is, talking about a mother and daughter living in the woods, isolated from people. Like, there's a lot of isolation that comes into play, and kind of exploration of how people feel about isolation and kind of what it could do to you, and, things like that. So I like that integration in there. It seems to also have a theme of older generations trying to stunt the potential of younger generations, which I think is a very important kind of societal thing that's going on right now, where definitely older generations, although, it is right now, but it's kind of always been that way. Older generations kind of always want to keep younger generations under thumb. They want to stunt their potential growth because they believe that they know what's better for them. And that's definitely a play in this film, and I think that was kind of one of the underlying themes, intentionally or unintentionally. There's also a bit of a theme of nature versus nurture in this, something that I spent so much time learning about when I was younger. I went through a bunch of geography courses. I have a major in geography, and then also a master's in geography. And they talk about nature versus nurture a lot, but they try to stay away from it. It's that whole idea for people who don't know of like how much of how you're raised influences who you become as a person versus where you're raised and your surroundings. So the kind of meshing of those two things within this film really kind of speaks to some ideas on that, and I liked it. I liked the way they did that. It made me start to think back to schooling, though, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I remember talking about this type of stuff, and it's just kind of like bringing things back. And finally, a theme of parental worry about raising children and who they will become. One of those things where parents, thankfully I am not one, kudos to everyone who is a parent, because I know it's tough. I have no desire to do it, so you are doing excellent work in comparison to what I'm doing, because I'm not raising kids. I'm raising my cat, that's it. Although she's a good cat, I've done a good job there. But anyway, you see this in horror films from time to time where it's these big fears that your child will come out messed up or they'll do something terrible because you didn't raise them right. And it's just these constant anxieties about, am I doing the right thing? I don't want them to make the mistakes that I made. I learned all these things in life, and so I'm kind of trying to lay down these guidelines, which kind of rolls into what I was saying before about the whole generational thing and kind of like stunting potential. And it's this kind of like tough tightrope walk of like, how much are you really helping versus how much are you hindering? So yeah, based off of everything I've said there's a lot at play here, and there's a lot that people can definitely pick apart and kind of, see themselves in the film or see interesting themes that kind of relate to their lives or things that they've thought about or experienced in their lives. So anyway, out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm giving this a very solid 3.5 star rating. I think I'd probably bump it to a 4 if it did not have the pacing issues here and there, but 3.5 stars for me, I don't give out lightly. So that is a nice rating for this film, and I would say definitely check it out. And if you have, or if you go and check it out, come back here, make some comments, tell me. Like it, hate it, in between. But don't just tell me that. Tell me why. Why do you like it? Why do you hate it? Why are you in between? Let's talk. Especially if there are things that you've seen in the film that I have not. And you can do spoilers in the comments. That's fine. Go ahead. Spoilers in the comments, everyone. Just know that. Do me another favor, though. Hit subscribe if you have not already. That is your best way to repay me if you like this video or any video I've ever done. Literally, at this point, I'm not making money doing this. This is just a creative outlet / creating a nerdy horror community where I can get nerdy about horror online. So I would appreciate, getting some more subscribers and just knowing that people want to join this community and talk nerdy horror with me. Or if you're just like, yeah, I support what you're doing, I like what you're doing, just give me the subscribe. Takes a second. It's quick and painless. Costs you no money. Also hit the notification bell button, because then you'll know when I'm putting up new videos, and I'm doing about 4 a week. Usually 4 a week. Sometimes more, in rare occasions a little bit less. But anyway, thanks regardless for taking your time to check this video out. And until next time, keep it brutal.